Harrison Ford felt there was something strangely different about his new housekeeper. One day, he decided to follow her home to uncover the truth behind his suspicions. What happened after that brought everyone to tears. "I have a feeling something is about to turn my life upside down." That was the only thought circling Harrison Ford's head as he watched the grainy black and white feed from the lobby security cam. He stood alone in his office on the top floor of a glass tower that clawed into the New York City skyline like it had something to prove. On screen, a woman had just stepped into the building. Nothing out of place, no heels too high, no perfume trailing behind. Just a simple dark braid hanging down the middle of her back, her shoulders squared, her pace steady, like she had somewhere to be and didn't care who was watching. Harrison leaned in closer to the monitor. Something about her made the air shift. Not beauty, exactly, but presence. That's what it was. She didn't just walk in, she entered. There was a difference. He'd seen dozens of housekeepers come and go through that lobby. Most were either too timid or too curious. They poked around, took too long, asked about things that weren't their business. He had no time for that. But this one? She didn't even glance at the gold-trimmed walls or the security desk. She just waited quietly by the elevator like she'd been coming there for years. Camila Herrera, the agency had said. Early 30s, reliable, keeps to herself. He hated vague summaries like that. But now, as he watched her, he realized maybe they didn't have better words. By the time the elevator dinged and she stepped into the hallway, Harrison had straightened his tie twice. Old habits. Not to impress, just reflex. He didn't believe in messiness. Not in business, not in his clothes, not in his emotions. When the door opened and he saw her standing there, dark eyes alert, face calm but not cold, he was hit with a weird flicker of recognition. Like he'd seen her before, somewhere that wasn't a building or a photo or a file. Somewhere real. "Mr. Ford?" she asked, voice steady. "Yes," he nodded. "Come in." She stepped over the threshold without hesitation, no nervous glances, no small talk. And just like that, something shifted. He didn't know what yet, but it felt like a stone dropping into water. Silent. Inevitable. Camila didn't ask questions. She didn't linger. She moved like someone who knew the value of time and wasn't about to waste anyone's, including her own. In the first week, Harrison barely saw her. Floors got cleaned, shirts appeared in his closet crisp and perfectly folded. Breakfast was ready at 7 o'clock a.m., on the dot. No earlier, no later. But what caught his attention most wasn't how she did her job. It was how she left. Every day, at exactly 6 o'clock p.m., Camila was gone. No exceptions, no overtime. When he asked if she could stay late for extra pay, she declined with a polite, "I'm afraid I can't, sir." No explanation, no excuses, just that. It gnawed at him, not because he needed her longer, but because it bothered him that someone had something else in their life that mattered enough to say no to him. He was used to being the center of the room, the sun around which everything revolved. But Camila had her own orbit, and it didn't include him. Yet. On the fourth day, he sat in his office pretending to work as the clock ticked towards 6 o'clock. She moved quietly across the hallway, tying her scarf, tucking a small bag under her arm, the same worn-out canvas tote she carried every day. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Ford." He barely looked up. "Have a good evening." Then, the moment the door clicked shut, he stood. His heart was thudding like it had no business doing so. But he didn't stop to question it. He grabbed his coat, took the emergency stairwell, and made it to the underground garage without even knowing why. He didn't plan to follow her, but that's exactly what he did. Camila walked like someone who had learned long ago how to blend in, but Harrison had spent years in boardrooms reading expressions, tracking patterns, sensing shifts in a room. She moved with purpose, like every minute of her day had a plan. She took the metro. He hesitated a full 30 seconds before following, standing stiff in a sea of tired commuters, trying to act like this wasn't the first time he'd ever stepped foot on public transport. She changed lines twice. The neighborhoods grew tighter, older, harder. The polished concrete of Polanco gave way to patched sidewalks and overhead wires that hung low like spiderwebs spun by the city's neglect. Then she turned off the main road, into a narrow alley lined with makeshift homes. Metal sheets, tarps, woodboard salvaged from somewhere forgotten. Harrison's chest ached, maybe from the walk, maybe from something deeper. Ahead, two girls sprinted from behind a stack of broken crates. "Aunt Cammy!" one shrieked. Camila crouched just in time to catch both of them in her arms. Her bag slid to the dirt, forgotten. And then Harrison saw something he hadn't seen in the penthouse, or in the elevator, or even on that security footage. She smiled. Not the polite kind. Not the tight-lipped, I have to smile. A real one. One that crinkled her eyes and melted the sharp lines of her face. "My princesses," she said, kissing their cheeks. "Did you behave today?" Harrison stepped behind a crooked telephone pole, barely breathing. The older girl, maybe 9, pointed a finger. "Sophia didn't eat her beans." "They were gross," the younger one shot back, clinging to Camila's waist. Camila laughed, soft and warm. "You too," she whispered. "Come on, let's go home." They disappeared behind a plastic sheet that acted as a front door. Inside, through a gap in the wall, Harrison saw them settle in. One mattress, one table, one shelf holding what looked like school supplies and a few cans of food. Camila lit a burner, opened a tin, divided a single piece of chicken into 3 pieces. He saw her give herself the smallest one. He watched them sit and eat, cross-legged on the floor, as if that tiny, broken home was a palace. He didn't realize he was crying until he felt the cold sting of it on his cheek. He'd spent his life designing systems, products, strategies. He'd built towers that kissed the clouds. And here, in a place with no roof, no privacy, and barely enough food, lived the most human moment he'd ever witnessed. That night, back in his penthouse, Harrison poured himself a glass of whiskey. It stayed untouched on the counter for hours. His gaze drifted across the vast, silent space. Everything clean, everything in its place, everything empty. He whispered the names without thinking. Lucia. Sophia. Harrison Ford didn't feel powerful, or accomplished, or in control. He just felt small. And somewhere in that quiet ache, he knew. That woman wasn't just another employee. She was going to be the reason everything changed. The next morning, the city moved like it always did, loud, humming, too alive for anyone to notice a man falling apart in silence. Harrison Ford stood in his penthouse kitchen, staring blankly at a bowl of untouched oatmeal. The walls around him gleamed, not a speck of dust in sight. The countertop could have been in a magazine, but it didn't make the coffee taste any better. He sat down, fork scraping across the ceramic, but never brought it to his mouth. Instead, he thought of a plastic curtain swaying in the wind, a girl's small hand wrapped around a woman's waist, a split piece of chicken handed out with a quiet smile. He kept seeing Camila, cross-legged on that thin mat, whispering something to the girls that made their tired faces light up. He had built his life to avoid moments like that, moments that meant something. But now, all he wanted was to go back, to sit in that cramped room and watch the way she looked at those kids like they were her whole world. The next few days, Harrison changed in small ways no one else would notice. But Camila did. He didn't hover, didn't question. But he started saying good morning instead of just nodding. He left apples on the kitchen counter with no note, a box of cookies on top of the fridge, a pack of colored pencils on the edge of his desk. Forgotten, supposedly. Camila didn't mention any of it. At first, she left the gifts untouched. By the second week, she was packing the apples into her bag. The cookies disappeared next. And when he found the colored pencils had moved from his desk to the trash, then to the top of the microwave, then into her tote bag. He smiled. One quiet Thursday afternoon, Harrison came home early. The apartment was filled with faint music, something soft, a bit sad, maybe in Spanish. He followed the sound to the laundry room and saw her folding towels. She was humming under her breath, not quite singing, but not silent either. He cleared his throat gently. She didn't flinch. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. Camila didn't look at him. "No, sir. Just finishing up the linens." Harrison leaned against the doorframe. "You can call me Harrison, you know." She paused for half a second. "I prefer to keep things professional." "Fair enough." He rubbed the back of his neck. I've been meaning to ask, if it's all right." Camila set down a towel and turned to face him. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were guarded. "About the girls," he said carefully. "Lucia and Sophia, they're your nieces?" Camila nodded slowly. "Yes, my sister's daughters. And their mother? She passed away 3 years ago." Something in her voice didn't invite pity, just truth. She said it the way someone might say, "It's raining." "I'm sorry to hear that." She gave a soft shrug. "We get by." But Harrison wasn't done. The words came out before he could stop them. "What happened to her?" Camila's hands stilled over a folded towel. She didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, like someone unwrapping an old wound with bare fingers, she said, "It was a hit and run. Late at night. She was coming home from a shift, crossing Avenida Tláhuac." The name of the street hit Harrison like a slap. The driver didn't stop. Witnesses said the lights were off. He never even slowed down. Camila didn't cry. She just folded the towel once more, hands firm. No one was ever caught. No license plate. No camera. Nothing. Harrison swallowed. His voice dropped. "Lucia saw it?" "She was with her," Camila nodded. "They were supposed to take the bus, but it started raining. Mariana was tired. They tried to cross early." A long breath left her chest. Not a sigh, something heavier, something dug from deeper. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She just looked at me and said, "Mom's not waking up." Camila turned away then, as if her own words were too much to stand in. "I moved in with them the next day," she added. "Didn't think about it. Just packed a bag. Left my old job. Been theirs ever since." Harrison didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to silence meaning so much. Later that night, Harrison sat at his dining table, a forgotten steak growing cold in front of him. He couldn't stop thinking about that street name, Tláhuac. It sounded familiar for reasons that crawled under his skin. Something deep in his gut told him he'd seen it before. A memo? A repair order? A damage report? He poured himself another drink but didn't touch it. Again. The next morning, the music was back. It came from the far end of the apartment, barely louder than a whisper. A scratchy old bolero tune, the kind Harrison Ford had only ever heard in movies or in passing from sidewalk cafes he never stopped to visit. But now, it drifted through the whitewashed silence of his penthouse like a breeze from another world. And underneath it, soft and steady, Camila was humming. Harrison paused in the hallway, coffee mug in hand, listening. The melody didn't match the sterile elegance of his penthouse. It didn't belong among polished chrome and glass walls, but somehow it felt right. Like maybe the place had never truly been lived in until now. He didn't speak, just listened. And for a moment, it felt like he wasn't alone. By Friday, he found himself planning his afternoon differently. He didn't rush to the office, didn't schedule another pointless meeting just to fill the time. Instead, he stopped by a bakery near the edge of the old quarter, a quiet place with brick walls, and a woman behind the counter who smiled without pretending. He picked out a small box of sweet empanadas and a few slices of something soft and cinnamon-spiced. The kind of thing you'd never find at corporate brunches or networking luncheons. On the ride back, he couldn't help smiling to himself. It felt ridiculous, like a teenage boy with a crush he didn't want to name. But it also felt good. Camila was finishing up in the kitchen when he walked in. He set the box on the counter. Didn't say a word, just peeled off his coat and moved toward the terrace. After a pause, she followed. The sun was dipping low over the skyline, painting everything in shades of gold and rust. Camila leaned against the railing, arms crossed loosely. Harrison handed her a plate. They said it's better warm, but it's still good cold. Camila took it without a word. Her expression gave nothing away, but her fingers lingered on the plate a little longer than they needed to. They sat on opposite sides of the terrace table, the silence between them no longer awkward, but familiar, like an old friend who knew how to keep quiet. After a few bites, Harrison leaned back and said, "Truth is, I'm not very good at eating alone." Camila glanced at him. Her lips curved, just slightly. "You seem like someone who's used to being alone." He nodded. "Doesn't mean I like it." They kept eating. The music inside had stopped, but something about that afternoon carried its echo. Soft, gentle, unhurried. "I was thinking about the girls," Harrison said finally. Camila looked up, guarded, not cold, just cautious. "I mean," he continued, "they seem like good kids, strong, like they've been through more than they should have had to." Camila's eyes softened just a touch. "They have," she said, "but they're still kids. They laugh, they argue, they ask me for ice cream when we barely have rice." A pause. "Sometimes I forget how young they are," she added. "Then Sophia climbs into bed with me because she had a bad dream, and suddenly I remember. She's 7. She shouldn't have to be brave." Harrison's throat tightened. Camila took a slow breath, then glanced out at the horizon. "My sister, Mariana, she did everything by herself," she said. 2 daughters, 2 different fathers. Neither stuck around long enough to matter. She didn't sound bitter, just tired. She worked nights, weekends, whatever she could get. Never complained. Not once. Said as long as the girls had shoes and lunch money, she could live with anything. Harrison didn't speak. His jaw was clenched too tight. Camila went on, her voice low. "That night, it was raining. She was coming home from her second shift. The girls were waiting at the bus stop. She tried to cross early to get to them faster. A car came out of nowhere. She didn't blink, just kept staring into the sunlit sky. They said the driver never even slowed down. No headlights. Nothing. Just hit her and kept going." Harrison stared down at his plate, the sweetness of the pastry now thick in his throat. "We couldn't afford a proper funeral," Camila added, almost to herself. "Lucia asked why the coffin was made of plywood. I told her it was what angels used." Her laugh was brittle, dry. "That's when I moved in. Took the girls, quit my job, didn't think twice. I couldn't let them be alone." Harrison wanted to say something, anything, but his mouth stayed shut, because all he could think about was a report, a street name, a time frame, a signature he hadn't questioned. That night, he sat in his office long after the lights had dimmed. His computer screen glowed in the dark. Search bar open, cursor blinking. Harrison Ford stared at the screen, a hollow ache sitting behind his ribs, slow and heavy. It was past midnight, the apartment draped in silence. Outside, the city slept, humming softly in its sleep. But inside this glass tower, a man was unraveling in pieces he couldn't name yet. He typed the words slowly, each keystroke feeling like a confession. "Glass Tech Incident Reports, 2020, Tlahuac." It didn't take long. One file, buried under layers of folders nobody ever checked, marked with internal codes and innocuous tags like Fleet Repair, Urgent. No accident report attached, just a request for expedited service. Minor front-end damage. Driver, Eduardo Villarreal, and then he saw it, an authorization form, signed by him. Harrison leaned back in his chair, a sick feeling spreading through his chest. He remembered none of it. It had probably come in with a stack of papers, a dozen other things needing his signature that day. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't thought to. Back then, he'd trusted the people beneath him to handle the details. That was what systems were for. But this wasn't a system error. This was a life, a mother, a sister, a moment that tore a family apart. And he'd signed it away without even looking up. The next morning, he called Javier Mendoza, former head of security. The man didn't answer at first, but Harrison didn't give up. He called again and again. By the fourth call, Javier finally picked up, his voice clipped, suspicious. "Mr. Ford, been a while." "I need the full file," Harrison said without greeting. "Vehicle number 87, October 2020, all of it." A pause, then a dry chuckle. "That file's been closed 3 years. Why the sudden interest?" "You know why." Harrison's voice was low. "I need it now." Another silence. Then Javier said, "Look, some things are better left where they are. You start pulling strings, it's not just you who goes down." "I don't care who goes down," Harrison said, teeth clenched. "I care about the truth." A long breath hissed through the speaker. "You're really not gonna let this go, huh?" "No," Harrison said. "Not this time." By noon, the files arrived. A thick folder scanned and encrypted. Inside, photographs, insurance records, internal emails between Javier and Villarreal. The trail was clear. Eduardo had been driving drunk, hit someone, panicked, and called Javier. Javier, in turn, had arranged a tow truck, repaired the vehicle at an off-the-record body shop. No police report, no insurance claim. Quiet money changed hands. Silence was bought and buried. In one of the emails, Javier had written, "Ford signed off already. He doesn't need the details. Keep it moving." Harrison closed the laptop. The bile burned in his throat. The next few days passed in a blur. He moved through the apartment like a ghost, hardly speaking. Camila noticed, of course. She wasn't the type to pry, but her eyes lingered on him longer now. She asked if he was sleeping. He lied. She brought him coffee he didn't drink, folded shirts he never wore, played soft music that didn't reach him. And one afternoon, as she gathered her things at exactly 6:00 p.m., she paused at the door and said, without looking at him, "If I ever find out who did that to my sister, I don't know what I'd do." Then she turned. "I don't want revenge," she added. "I just want it to matter. I want it to mean something." Harrison felt something inside him twist so tight it nearly broke. She was talking to herself, but the words found him anyway. By Friday, he couldn't take it anymore. He made the call. Villarreal answered on the second ring. "Harrison," the voice said, smooth and smug. "Didn't expect to hear from you. Heard you're going soft these days." "I need to see you, in person," Harrison said. "Today." There was a beat. "Is this about that thing from 20? You know damn well it is." Another chuckle. "Well, now this sounds like a real fun afternoon." They met in Harrison's private office. Empty now, stripped down, a shell of the power it once held. Villarreal walked in like he owned the place, wearing a tailored jacket and that same self-satisfied grin Harrison remembered. He sat without being asked, legs crossed, one arm slung casually over the chair. "Well," he said, "if this is a guilt trip, let me save you the time. What's done is done. We buried it. Nobody got wise." Harrison stood behind his desk, the file in his hand. "She had 2 daughters," he said quietly. "She was crossing the street to get to them." Villarreal shrugged. "Look, it was an accident. You think I meant to hit her? I was tired. I shouldn't have been driving. I panicked." "You ran." "I panicked," Villarreal repeated louder. And Javier handled it, like he was paid to. You covered it up. We covered it up, Villarreal said, leaning forward. You signed the authorization, remember? Repair approval. You. That's your name right there. Harrison's fingers gripped the folder tighter. You're not innocent in this, Ford, Villarreal said, his voice dropping to a sneer. You just didn't want to know. That's how men like us stay clean. I didn't know, Harrison said through his teeth. No, Villarreal smirked. You didn't ask. The room pulsed with silence. Then Harrison said, I'm going to the police. Villarreal's grin faltered. You do that, you take us both down. You think they'll believe you didn't know? I'll tell them the truth. Villarreal rose from his chair, his face darkening. You throw me under, I'll drag you with me. We both sink. Then we sink, Harrison said. That night, Harrison sat in the corner of his living room, lights off, blinds drawn. The file lay open beside him, a photograph of Mariana clipped to the report. She looked like Camila, same eyes, same quiet strength. The girls would never remember her laugh, he thought. Not really. They'd grow up with pieces of her, stories, a scent on a scarf, a photo in a frame. That was all they had left. The city didn't know what he'd done. Not yet. Not the people walking below his windows, not the clients waiting for his replies, not the board members still calling his phone. The world kept turning, unbothered. But inside Harrison Ford's chest, something had stopped. The photo of Mariana stared up at him from the folder like it was waiting for an answer he couldn't give. He hadn't slept, couldn't eat. His body moved, but his mind stayed behind, locked in that room with Villarreal, trapped in the echo of his own guilt. You signed it. You didn't ask. The words circled his thoughts like buzzards. He couldn't look at Camila, not now, not with this truth stuck in his throat. But the truth, like all things buried too long, had a way of crawling to the surface on its own. Camila noticed the shift before he said a word. She didn't know about the file. Not yet. But she could feel it. The weight in his voice, the pause in his eyes, the way his good mornings had started sounding like I'm sorry in disguise. She kept working, quiet, observing. That afternoon, while tidying the office, she reached for a stack of documents resting by the edge of the desk. The air conditioner rattled above, and as she leaned forward, the papers slipped loose. They hit the floor like feathers, but landed like bricks. Camila bent to pick them up, fingers brushing against the manila folder that had slid open. Her breath caught. There, on top of the pile, was a photo, slightly faded. A smile she hadn't seen in 3 years. Mariana, her sister. Young, tired, radiant, stubborn, alive. And clipped beneath it, a report. Not just any report. A death, a date, a location, a car number. The name Glass Tech repeated in headers, footers, emails. Camila's hands trembled. She read it all, every page. She didn't cry at first, just sat on the edge of the couch, the folder spread open in her lap, her mouth slack, her heart pounding like it had been dropped from a height. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't a maybe. This was confirmation. It took hours for the tears to come. And when they did, they weren't loud. No sobs, no cries that rattled the walls. Just quiet, relentless tears slipping down her face like they'd been waiting too long to fall. She felt cold, not from the air, but from something inside her going numb. The man she had slowly come to trust, the man who watched her nieces play with a softness she hadn't expected, had been part of the system that erased Mariana from the world. Not the one behind the wheel. No, but he had signed the line, let it pass, looked the other way. And wasn't that what hurt most? He hadn't meant to, but he hadn't cared enough to know. When Harrison opened the door later that evening, he knew. He didn't even have to see her face. The stillness told him, the weight in the air. the absence of movement. Camila never sat still, not unless something had cracked open. She was on the balcony, arms resting in her lap, her eyes staring at the sky like it might offer a different version of the truth. The folder was open on the table beside her, the photo on top, weighted down by a half-empty glass of water. Harrison's steps faltered. His breath snagged in his chest. He wanted to turn around, to buy himself one more hour, one more day where she didn't know, but it was too late. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "How long have you known?" His voice was hoarse. "A few days." Camila nodded slowly, like she was absorbing the weight of that time. A few days. Just long enough to be too long. "I confronted Villarreal," Harrison added. "He admitted everything. I've started building the case. I've already contacted legal. He'll be—" "I don't want to hear about your legal team," she said softly. Not angry, just tired. "I want to know why you didn't tell me." "I didn't know how." "You looked me in the eye," she said. "You sat on that terrace with me, listened to me talk about her, and you said nothing." "I was scared," he admitted. "For me or for you?" He didn't answer, and that, more than anything, told her what she needed to know. Camila reached for the folder, running her fingers gently over the photo before closing it. "I told you once," she said, "that I didn't want revenge. I wanted it to matter." Harrison nodded, his hands tightening at his sides. "I meant that," she went on. "But now I don't know what anything means." She finally looked at him then. Her eyes weren't hateful, just lost. "I let you into their lives," she whispered. "I let them believe you were something safe. And you're not a bad man, Harrison. But you're not innocent either." He stepped closer, cautiously, like one wrong breath might shatter the floor beneath them. "I didn't know," he said again, the words thin and aching. "But that doesn't excuse it. I've lived my whole life looking the other way, signing things, skipping the fine print. I thought that made me efficient, but it made me blind." Camila looked down. "I need time," she said, almost to herself. "I don't know how to look at you right now." The apartment was quiet the next morning, too quiet. Harrison walked into the living room expecting to see signs of her, her coat draped on the back of the dining chair, the faint hum of old boleros playing from her phone, the smell of warm cinnamon tea steeping in the kitchen. But there was nothing. No sound, no scent, no Camila. Her key wasn't on the hook. Her tote bag wasn't by the door. The folded linens she always left on the hallway shelf were gone. Gone. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't left a note. Harrison stared at the place where she always placed her mug on the counter, as if expecting it to reappear. But she was gone. And this time, she didn't leave a door cracked open. He called her phone twice that morning. No answer. By noon, he'd texted. Just a simple message. "I understand, but I hope you and the girls are safe." There was no reply. He tried again the next day. Still nothing. The penthouse had never felt like home to him. It had always been a polished place to exist. But now, it felt too big, too cold. Every echo sounded like regret. He stopped eating at the table, sat by the windows instead, watching the sky move over the city, wondering where she'd gone. Camila had taken the girls south, back to her hometown in Oaxaca, though she hadn't lived there in years. The place hadn't changed much. Dusty roads, painted cinderblock houses, hills stretching far and quiet in the distance. An old friend of hers, Marta, opened her door without questions. "Stay as long as you need," Marta said, pulling her into a hug. Lucia and Sophia settled quickly, chasing chickens and playing barefoot in the red dirt. There was something soothing in the simplicity of it all. No glass walls, no elevators. Just sky and trees and silence that didn't ask for explanations. Camila kept to herself mostly. She swept the floors, cooked, sat on the porch long after the girls went to bed. She thought of Harrison every night, then told herself not to. Back in the city, Glasstech was on every news channel. The arrest of Eduardo Villarreal shocked no one who really knew him. But the real story, the one people couldn't stop talking about, was Harrison Ford stepping down. Voluntarily. At the press conference, he stood behind the microphone, thinner than usual, pale but steady. He wore no tie, no branding, no corporate smile. He looked straight into the cameras and said, "I approved a repair without asking why it was urgent. I didn't know someone had died, but I signed it. That's on me." Reporters shouted questions, but he raised a hand, silencing the room. "I've spent a lifetime building walls around myself. I thought I could live without the details. But people are the details. I missed that, and I'm sorry." He paused. "I'm stepping down, effective immediately. I won't be staying on the board. I don't want my name on anything that ignores pain to protect profit." And just like that, Harrison Ford walked off the stage. Camila watched the press conference from Marta's little TV, sitting at the kitchen table with a chipped cup of coffee in her hand. She didn't cry. But something inside her broke loose and drifted. There he was. Thinner, older somehow, like he'd dropped 10 pounds of pride. His voice was steadier than she expected, but not cold, just stripped down. He wasn't fighting to protect himself. He was surrendering, not to the world, but to the truth. Marta sat down across from her and said nothing, until Camila whispered, "He didn't blame anyone else." Marta raised her eyebrows. "Did you expect him to?" "No," Camila said, almost too quietly. "I just didn't expect him to sound so empty." That night, it rained. The kind of rain that comes without warning. Fast, hard, like the sky finally gave up holding back. Camila was tucking Lucia into bed when the girl turned over and asked, "Aunt Cammy, does Mr. Harrison still like me?" The question hit her like a slap, gentle but jarring. Camila looked down at her niece's eyes, dark and open, searching for something solid. "I think he thinks about you every day," she said softly. Lucia blinked. "I miss him." Camila didn't speak. Then Lucia asked, "Are you mad at him forever?" Camila swallowed. "I don't know." "'Cause he made a mistake?" Camila nodded. "People make mistakes all the time," Lucia said matter-of-factly. "Remember when I told Sophia she looked like a turtle? She cried for a week." Camila smiled for the first time in days. "That was a little different." Lucia shrugged. "But I said sorry. She forgave me." She turned onto her side, already drifting. Camila sat on the edge of the bed long after the girls had fallen asleep, her hands in her lap, the sound of rain drumming on the tin roof above. She thought of how Harrison looked on that stage. Not powerful, not proud, just human. And maybe, just maybe, forgiveness wasn't for him. Camila didn't plan it. She didn't pack much either. Just a duffel bag, some spare clothes for the girls, and a few folded drawings they'd insisted on bringing. Crayon hearts and stick figure portraits, one of which had Harrison's name spelled in uneven block letters. She didn't call ahead, didn't text. She just woke up one morning, heart beating too loud in her chest, and knew it was time. Marta tried to talk her out of it gently. "You sure you're ready, mija?" Camila nodded, adjusting Lucia's jacket. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said. "But I know I don't want to hide anymore." She kissed Marta goodbye, loaded the girls into the bus, and took the long road north. The city crept up slowly, like a memory rising from the fog. By the time the skyline came into view, Camila's fingers were clutched around the straps of her bag, white-knuckled and silent. The doorman at the building blinked twice when he saw her. "Señorita Camila?" She gave a small smile. "Is he home?" He nodded slowly. "Hasn't left in days." Camila looked down at Lucia and Sophia. "You remember the way?" They nodded in unison. She didn't take the elevator. She climbed the stairs, her legs aching by the third flight, lungs tightening with every step. Not from the exertion, but from everything else. Fear, doubt, longing. It all came up with her. By the time she reached his door, her hands were shaking. She didn't knock right away, just stood there, breathing. Then she raised her hand and tapped 3 times. Harrison opened the door slowly. His face was thinner, the lines around his mouth deeper. His eyes, tired but clear, locked onto hers like he wasn't sure she was real. "Camila?" he whispered. She nodded once. Lucia stepped out from behind her, holding the drawing with Harrison's crooked name. "Hi," she said simply. Sophia clung to her leg, eyes darting toward the hallway, unsure. Harrison looked at them, then back at Camila. His mouth opened, but no words came. Camila took 1 step inside. The apartment was a mess. Papers on the table, dishes piled up in the sink, dust gathering in corners. The coldness of the space was louder now, with the absence of her presence fully exposed. She set her bag down, walked to the couch, and sat. He closed the door behind them like he was afraid too much air might blow this moment away. They didn't speak right away. Lucia sat cross-legged on the rug, laying out her drawings. Sophia curled into the arm of the couch, thumb in her mouth. Harrison moved with a slow stiffness, like his joints had forgotten how to function properly in her presence. He sat across from her, not too close. Camila looked around. "This place is worse without me," she said softly. Harrison gave a dry, breathless chuckle. "Everything is." They sat with that for a moment. Then she looked him in the eye and asked, "What are you going to do with your life now?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been asking myself that every morning." "And?" He shrugged. "I wake up. I make coffee. I read the news. I think about what I destroyed. Then I make another cup." "That's not living," she said. "No," he replied. "It's not." She looked at the girls, watching them play with crumpled crayons and half-torn paper. Then she turned back to him. "I don't need you to fix anything," she said. He nodded. "I know. I don't even need you to explain anymore. You've said everything that needed saying." He met her gaze. But I can't promise I'm not still angry. You have every right to be." She folded her hands in her lap. "But I don't want to stay angry forever. I don't want that for the girls. Or for me." He swallowed hard. "If you need me gone..." "No." She cut him off gently. "I didn't come here for you to disappear." He looked up, slowly. She leaned back. The afternoon light filtered through the windows, touching the edges of her hair. There was tiredness in her face, but also something else. A softness that hadn't been there before. "I came to ask you something," she said. "Anything." She let out a breath. "Do you think you can live a simple life?" Harrison blinked. "Simple?" She nodded. "Like us. No penthouse, no staff, no layers of power. Just morning school runs and groceries and burnt rice." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I don't know how." "That's honest," she said. "So let me ask it another way." She looked at him fully, without flinching. "Would you want to learn?" Harrison's throat tightened. He looked at Lucia, who was now coloring a sun into a corner of her page, tongue sticking out in concentration. Then he looked back at Camila, and his voice cracked just a little. "Yes," he said, "but only if you're willing to teach me." Camila smiled. Not the polite kind, not the guarded kind. A real one. Soft. Quiet. The for sale sign went up just 3 days after Camila and the girls came back. No grand announcements. No negotiations drawn out over martinis in corner offices. Harrison signed the paperwork with the same hand that used to sign multi-million-dollar contracts. But this time, he felt it. Every line, every letter. By the following week, the penthouse was just a shell again, stripped of anything warm, anything human. A real estate agent asked if he wanted to keep the chandelier. He said no. He didn't want to carry a single cold thing into the life he was building now. He moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment tucked between leafy trees and worn cobblestones in Coyoacan, the kind of place where windows were always cracked open and neighbors still left bread at your door when someone was sick. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't high-rise, but it was real. Camila didn't move in right away. They took it slow, like two people learning to wade into water after nearly drowning. She visited in the evenings first, always with the girls, always bringing something. Tamales wrapped in foil, a small jar of hibiscus tea, Lucia's new drawing. Some nights, they stayed late. Sophia would fall asleep on the couch, curled up in Harrison's old college sweatshirt. Lucia would sit on the rug and challenge him to rematches in chess until her eyelids drooped. One night, Camila looked at the sleeping girls, then at Harrison and said, "It's late." He looked at her, gentle, unsure. "You could just stay." She hesitated, then nodded. After that, they didn't leave. Living together didn't come with a ribbon or a toast. It came with grocery lists and socks left in corners. It came with Sophia refusing to eat lentils, Lucia complaining about school uniforms, Camila muttering in the kitchen when the rice burned, and Harrison, for once, didn't run. He was awkward at first, burnt eggs, too much detergent in the washer, bumping into everyone in the narrow hallway. But he learned. Camila taught him how to clean the burner without scratching the surface. Sophia taught him how to braid Barbie hair, though he was terrible at it. Lucia taught him how to lose at chess without sulking. Every lesson felt like penance. Every lesson, a thread pulling him into something he never thought he deserved: belonging. He converted the sunroom into a tiny home office, opened a tech consultancy, small jobs at first, helping local businesses build websites, streamline their systems. No suits, no assistants, just him, a laptop, and a quiet joy he hadn't felt in decades. It didn't pay like glass tech, but the girls would peek in while he worked, and Camila would sometimes leave a hot cup of coffee on the desk without saying a word, and that was worth more than all the bonuses he used to chase. Camila signed up for night classes at the community college, administrative management. She'd wanted to study that before everything happened, before her sister died, before she had to become mother, father, provider, protector, everything at once. Harrison watched her come home after class. Her eyes lit up in a way he hadn't seen before. She'd talk about lectures, professors, words like project management and process analysis. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rebuilding her dream, brick by brick. He never told her how proud he was, but he made sure the porch light was always on when she got home late. Saturdays became sacred. They packed sandwiches, a secondhand picnic blanket, Lucia's chessboard, and Sophia's sketchbook, then headed to Viveros Park. Camila would bring fruit. Harrison brought his camera, an old Nikon he hadn't touched in years. He started taking photos again, not of skylines or tech expos or luxury interiors, but of Sophia's curls blowing in the breeze, of Lucia squinting at the chessboard, of Camila laughing with her hand over her mouth like she was still learning how to let sound out freely. He printed the photos, taped them up on the fridge. The walls of their home slowly turned into a gallery of healing. It happened one late Sunday afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, painting everything gold. Harrison was tying his sneakers while Camila packed up the empty Tupperware. Sophia, without thinking, ran past him, arms full of markers and papers, shouting, "Daddy, look what I drew!" She skidded to a stop, looked up at him, realized what she'd just said. Her mouth hung open. Cheeks turned red. Lucia turned, eyes wide. Camila froze. And Harrison, he didn't breathe, didn't move. It felt like everything paused, even the wind. Sophia looked like she might cry. But then Harrison knelt slowly, opened his arms and said, "Can I see it?" She ran into his hug before the sentence was even done. Camila watched as he held Sophia close, his face buried in her shoulder, his shoulders trembling ever so slightly. He didn't say a word, but his eyes told her everything. That night, While brushing her teeth, Camila caught her own reflection in the mirror and saw something new: peace. She didn't remember the exact moment it started growing, but it was there now. And it was strong. They weren't a perfect family. There were late bills and burnt toast, and nights when the girls fought over toothpaste or cried over missing Mariana. But there was also music in the kitchen, homework on the coffee table, laughter that came uninvited. And there was Harrison, no longer the man behind the glass, but a man learning how to hold a family in both hands, gently. He'd been called many things in his life: CEO, partner, investor. But now he had a new name. Not every day, not even always out loud. But sometimes, just often enough, he'd hear a little voice say, "Daddy," and that was enough. The morning was quiet. Not heavy, not somber. Just quiet, in the way you hold your breath without realizing, because something important is about to happen. It had been 3 years to the day. The girls dressed early, Lucia in her school uniform even though it was Saturday, and Sophia in a pink dress with a stain on the sleeve she refused to part with. Camila didn't press her to change. It wasn't about clothes today. She packed a thermos of cinnamon tea, folded the letter she'd stayed up late writing, and placed it in her purse beside 2 napkins and a pack of tissues she hoped she wouldn't need. Harrison walked into the kitchen carrying a small bouquet, wild daisies and white chrysanthemums he'd picked himself at the flower market that morning. "Not fancy," he said. Camila looked at them and smiled. Mariana never liked fancy. Lucia held her math award in both hands like it might fly away. Sophia carried a drawing of their mother, a figure with long brown hair, big eyes, and a smile too big for the page. They didn't say much on the drive. Harrison's truck moved slow, steady, through back roads that didn't rush anyone. The girls sat in the back, heads resting against the windows, the way kids do when they're thinking hard but don't have the words yet. The cemetery sat on a low hill just outside the city, where the noise didn't reach and everything smelled faintly of earth and pine. They walked together, single file at first, then shoulder to shoulder as they reached the row of simple hand-painted stones. Mariana's grave was near the end. It wasn't grand, just a white stone marked with her name, 2 dates, and the words, "Siempre con nosotras," always with us. Lucia knelt first, placing her certificate down carefully beside the headstone. Then she touched the cold stone with her fingertips and whispered something too soft to catch. Sophia stepped forward and laid her drawing next to it, folding the corners gently so it wouldn't blow away. "I made her hair extra long," she said to no one in particular, "like in that picture on the wall." Camila stood silently for a moment before reaching into her purse and pulling out the letter. She sat cross-legged on the grass and unfolded the page with both hands. The wind tugged gently at the corners. Then she began to read. "Dear Mariana, I don't know where to start. Some days I still wake up thinking I'll hear your voice from the kitchen, cursing about burned toast or lost socks. Other days I don't remember the sound of your laugh until someone else laughs just like you, and then it all comes back too fast. You were the strong one, always, even when we were kids. You protected me from things I didn't even know I needed protecting from. You never made me feel like I owed you for it. You just loved. I used to think I was weak because I couldn't carry what you carried. After you were gone, I tried to be like you. I tried to be everything. But I wasn't ready, and I wasn't strong. Not at first. I hated the world for taking you. I hated the man who drove that car. I hated the company that covered it up. And if I'm being honest, I hated him too, the one who let it happen without even knowing he did. But hate is a heavy thing, Hermana. It weighs you down so deep you forget who you are underneath it. I don't want to hate anymore. I want to live. For you, for the girls. And I want to forgive, not because it's easy, but because you would have told me that carrying pain forever doesn't bring justice. It just buries you with it. So, I'm trying. One breath at a time. Her voice caught near the end. Not a sob. just a pause, like something sharp had passed through her chest and left her still standing. She folded the letter and placed it beside the flowers, pressing it down with a smooth stone. Then she turned to Harrison. He hadn't moved. His hands were tucked into his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the grave like he was watching something unfold that no one else could see. He stepped forward and slowly knelt. He didn't speak right away, just reached out and ran a thumb over the name etched into the stone. It was gentle, reverent, like he was asking permission. Then, with a voice that barely held together, he said, "I didn't know you, but I failed you, and I'll carry that the rest of my life." He looked up at Camila, then at the girls, then back at the grave. "I promise I will never fail them. Not again." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply placed the flowers down, his fingers lingering on the petals. Then he stayed there, kneeling, while the others sat nearby on the grass, leaning into each other like pieces of something once broken, now learning how to hold shape again. They stayed until the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the hillside. Lucia picked up small white petals and threaded them into Sophia's hair. Camila sipped from the thermos and passed it around. Harrison took a sip last, surprised by the warmth of cinnamon and clove on his tongue. It wasn't comfort, but it was something close. When they stood to leave, Camila reached for Harrison's hand. He looked down at it, her fingers smaller, worn from years of carrying more than her share. He didn't take it right away. He looked at her first, but her eyes didn't ask for anything this time. They offered. And when he slipped his hand into hers, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. It was the kind of morning that didn't ask much from the world. Just light. Just quiet. Camila stood barefoot on the worn tile floor, arms folded across her chest, her nightshirt still wrinkled from sleep. The smell of cut fruit and warm toast drifted through the open window. Sunlight spilled across the table, caught in the steam of the kettle. Harrison was slicing bananas, humming under his breath, some old Johnny Cash tune that had crept into his brain and stayed there. His glasses sat low on his nose. His hair was mussed in a way that suggested he'd gotten up early, tried to be quiet, and failed halfway through. Across the room, Lucia and Sophia were sitting cross-legged on the rug, building a puzzle of a colorful world map. Camila watched them for a long moment. Her breath caught in her throat, not from sadness or fear, but from how deeply right it all felt. This wasn't the life she thought she'd end up with. It wasn't the house her sister dreamed of. But it was warm. It was alive. And it was hers. The letter came that afternoon, folded neat, tucked between junk mail and a coupon for window cleaner. Camila sat on the porch steps to open it, the breeze playing with the hem of her skirt. When she read the words, "Congratulations, you passed," she didn't cheer or cry or shout. She just smiled, quiet and sure. The kind of smile you give the version of yourself who once thought she'd never get here. She walked inside, letter in hand, and waved it once in the air. Sophia was the first to react, sprinting across the room, arms wide. "You did it! You did it!" she shouted, crashing into Camila's legs. Lucia let out a whooping cheer that startled the neighbor's cat. Harrison stepped out from the kitchen holding a bowl of popcorn, looked at the girls jumping and spinning, then raised his eyebrows. "Should I be worried or celebrating?" Camila held up the letter. He didn't say anything, just grinned, the kind that reaches all the way to the eyes. That night, they ordered pizza, real greasy kind, and let the girls pile extra cheese without guilt. They had soda with dinner, broke out 2 tubs of ice cream, and played a game of charades so chaotic it ended with Lucia laughing so hard she spilled milk on Harrison's pants. He didn't even flinch, just looked down and said, "Good. I needed an excuse to finally wash these." Later, after the girls were asleep, Lucia with a book still open on her chest, Sophia curled into a blanket fort. Camila and Harrison sat on the back steps. The garden was small, barely lit by the soft glow from the kitchen window. They shared a blanket, her hand resting against his arm. "Do you remember," she said softly, "the The day I asked if you could live simply. I do, he said. You asked if I'd learn, and you said only if I'd teach you. He smiled. Have I passed the course? You're getting there. They sat in silence for a moment, the crickets singing in the dark. Then Camila said, You used to be afraid of losing everything. I was, he nodded. And now? He turned to her, eyes steady. Now I understand. Losing everything didn't break me, but losing you, that would. She didn't cry, didn't need to. She just leaned forward, pressed her lips to his forehead, and whispered, Then don't. The next morning, Harrison found Lucia sitting at the kitchen table, tongue between her teeth, fingers tangled around red thread and a plastic bead kit. What are you working on there, Picasso? She didn't look up. A surprise. He nodded, played it cool, and made his coffee. 2 days later, Camila walked into the living room to find Harrison kneeling awkwardly on one knee, holding out a ring. It wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. It was red thread, braided into a small circle, the ends tied by a pair of little hands. Camila blinked, her breath catching in surprise. He said nothing grand, just, I want to keep choosing you. Every day. She looked at the ring. She looked at the man who had once built towers to avoid feeling, who now made pancakes too thick and cut fruit too thin, but stayed. She took the ring, slid it on her finger. I'm saying yes, she said. Not because you made it right, but because you became someone who tries to. 8 months passed, slow and kind. Their little home bloomed, not in riches, but in roots. Sophia planted butterfly pea vines in the back garden, bright purple flowers growing wild and proud along the fence. Harrison helped her water them every Sunday morning, his hands covered in soil, his shirt stained and untucked. Lucia began piano lessons, her fingers clumsy but determined. On weekends, the house echoed with the sound of scales and misplayed melodies, and nobody complained. Camila bought a new notebook, lined, clean, her name written at the top. She sat at the kitchen table every night, updating her resume, researching companies that wouldn't blink at her age, her background, her past. She found one, small firm, local, humble. She applied and waited. One Tuesday, she walked into her first interview in 10 years. Pressed shirt, tight smile, palms damp. The interviewer, a woman about her age, asked, What makes you strong? Camila thought of all the right answers. Time management, resilience, flexibility. But she spoke from somewhere deeper. I used to think strength was doing everything alone. But I learned that real strength is letting others walk with you. She paused. I lost someone. My sister. She was my compass. After she died, I forgot how to move forward. The interviewer said nothing, just listened. Camila continued, But I found my way again. Through 2 little girls who kept waking up and living, even on the days I couldn't, and a man who once lost his soul to the wrong kind of success, but gave it all up just to learn how to care again. The room was quiet. The woman finally nodded. That's a kind of strength we don't teach in business school. The job was hers by the end of the week. They didn't celebrate with champagne. They didn't toast. They just cooked dinner together. Sautéed onions, rice, beans, and eggs. Simple, filling, familiar. Lucia played her first full song on the piano that night. Sophia danced in her socks. Camila laughed until her sides ached, and Harrison from the doorway watched it all like a man witnessing the rarest kind of miracle, the kind that comes without lightning or trumpets. Just love, earned slow and honest. One evening, he found Camila standing in the doorway of the girls' bedroom, arms crossed, a sleepy smile on her face. The girls were already dreaming, one sprawled, one curled, both safe. Harrison stepped beside her. They're growing fast, he whispered. Camila nodded. So are we. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman who had survived everything, but the woman who had rebuilt herself from the bones of sorrow. Camila turned to him, her voice low. "Love isn't a finish line, Harrison." "I know. It's a choice, a hard one, every single day." He nodded. "Then let's keep choosing." She reached for his hand, and in the dim hallway light, surrounded by a life neither of them expected but both of them chose, they stood still, not needing to move, not needing to speak, just there, together. This story is a quiet, deeply emotional journey of brokenness, healing, and the slow rediscovery of what truly matters. At its heart, it follows Harrison Ford, a man who once lived behind glass walls of power and privilege, on his path from guilt and detachment toward humility, redemption, and love. His transformation is subtle yet profound. What makes it so impactful is that it doesn't happen through grand gestures, but through everyday moments, shared meals, bedtime stories, mistakes owned, and forgiveness earned. Camila, too, is unforgettable. She carries her pain with grace, never seeking pity. Her strength lies not in being unbreakable, but in choosing to love again after loss. Watching her open her heart, not just to Harrison, but to the possibility of a life she thought she had lost, is one of the most moving arcs in the story. The most powerful lesson here is that love, real love, isn't perfect. It's messy, slow, and full of work. But when rooted in truth, accountability, and patience, it can rebuild even the most shattered pieces. The story reminds us that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing hope over bitterness, and that the simplest life, when shared with love, is the richest of all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and be with you every step of the way.